Hey, hi guys. Sorry, we're still setting up here in the studio. Carla Garrick here for the Independence. It is Wednesday. I am streaming on X, Facebook, and YouTube, and we will be doing a show about the revelations and information that is coming out with regard to Fauci, with a quick update about PorkFest as well. There was this article that came out, so I will cover that, and I will catch everyone on the flip side.
Coming to you live from the heart of the free state of New Hampshire, this is The Independence with Carla Garrick. And now, here's your host, Carla Garrick.
Hi guys, and welcome back to The Independence. I am Carla Garrick, and I will be your host for the next 30 minutes. Today we will be discussing, first of all, a very quick update on the Porcupine Freedom Festival taking place this week all over the great state of New Hampshire. That is the 23rd PorkFest, unbelievably. And I will talk a little bit about the article that came out in In-Depth New Hampshire, kind of telling everyone the lay of the land there. Then we are going to do a deep dive into these revelations that are coming out with regard to Fauci, with regard to the lab leak, with regard to the lies, the propaganda, the censorship, the silencing that took place during COVID mania, where you heard on the regular, almost like they were neural programming you, terms like listen to the experts, meaning don't think for yourself, follow the science. We know science actually changes based on information. You were told don't do your own research. What kind of people tell you not to look into things for yourself? You were told don't even believe anyone who is saying something different. You should absolutely trust the experts. Turns out you should not have trusted the experts, the people who are telling you to shut up and listen. So I'm sure folks are following what is going on. But if you don't follow alternate media sources or have your own X account or, actually try to find the truth, you probably don't know what's going on. And here is the example that I can give all of you. So you might recall when COVID mania was just starting. So let's cast our minds back to, January or February of 2020, when all the crazy stories were coming out of Wuhan. They had that video of the Chinese people dropping dead, sort of on repeat on all the mainstream media sources. And there was a story that kind of bubbled up for a little while and then disappeared. And that story was about a bunch of pangolins. Now, if like me, you're like, what even is a pangolin? That's intentional. So that pangolin story was seeded as a narrative control into the media. The story originally was as they were trying to cover up the lab leak of a gain-of-function virus that was paid for by American taxpayers, that it now seems very evident and clear, because Fauci's been covering it up for 6 years, that that was the real story. So lab leak, the truth. Pangolin, nonsense, actual nonsense. But this pangolin story is the one that they put out in the newspapers. Now, at least six stories were published in the New York Times, the Gray Lady, as she is called. And that was all narrative control, because what they had to do is they had to create a cover story for the lab leak So they made it sort of crazy and absurd. Wet market, people eat pangolins. If you say something, you're a racist, to kind of just make it very murky over here so that no one looks too hard at why perhaps it was a lab leak. So this pangolin story had at least 6 stories in the New York Times at the time. Now on Friday, this past Friday, as her last act as a serving us at DNI, Tulsi Gabbard came out with a very comprehensive packet of information that proves, or at least provides, a lot of evidence that Fauci and his cohorts and his cronies knew it was a lab leak. They knew they had funded it. They knew they were in trouble. They knew it was a terrible story. And so they covered it up. Now, I hope I am able to make your head explode with the following. So this seems like a pretty big revelation, right? That Rand Paul is working on. Rand Paul just subpoenaed Fauci to appear again in front of the Department of Homeland Security, where Rand is chair. That will be coming up in July. Of course, there have been congressional hearings in the past. The truth is slowly coming out. We're using FOIA. We're getting drips and drabs here. But I hope this shocks you. From those revelations on Friday, where Tulsi said, hey, here's the case of what Fauci knew, when he knew it, what he was doing, who funded what, here it all is. There have been zero stories in the New York Times about that. There's been very, very, very limited coverage in the mainstream media. And that should make you almost as angry as the past 6 years and what they did during COVID mania should make you. So let's make it a little local flavor. And first, I want to give a shout out to one of our state reps up at the State House, Yuri Polozov. And he's a state rep, and he's been serving on the Medical Freedom Caucus. And they've been doing some really great work here in New Hampshire. In fact, HB 1811 was introduced. Unfortunately, it didn't quite get the support it needed. I think it's something we need to bring back. But what they were trying to do with that bill was remove all statutory childhood immunization requirements in the state of New Hampshire. Why? Because your body, your choice. Now, the insane thing that happened during COVID is suddenly that argument that we have all been conditioned over the years to understand, your body, your choice, is the argument that is brought in with the abortion debate. Personally, I am pro-life. I would never get an abortion. I judge people who do it harshly. But I understand self-ownership, and I understand the notion of bodily integrity. And so if you are going to make the case, your body, your choice, my body, my choice, in order to abort your offspring, then you have to be consistent, and you have to actually apply that exact same logic to bodily integrity in all situations, which means the government does not own you. The government does not get to mandate what you have to inject yourself with, especially not an experimental product for which the manufacturers carry zero liability. So it's almost like we went into this fog, right? Like looking back, I hope, and I can see from sort of how people are reacting to this content, that a lot of people are actually waking up. So Yuri put this HB 1811 in. I would love to see us all sort of work together and see if it's something we can get over the finish line from left to right, because I think New Hampshire would be even more attractive as a destination if we can say, we understand bodily autonomy here in New Hampshire, and we do not force anyone to get an injection against their will in order to go to school. So hopefully we'll bring it back. The idea also with that bill was to make the DHHS, so that's federal, right? Oh no, I think it's DNHS, to make their recommendations purely advisory. So you get to, tell us what you think, but you can't make us do it. And I feel so strongly about this that I wonder if we should be doing a constitutional amendment in order to enshrine the right to bodily autonomy in the New Hampshire Constitution. Now, I actually want to say that I think the founders would be shocked and horrified to realize that our rights have been so distorted, right? Because foundationally, your rights are inherent. They're inalienable. You don't get them from the government. The government doesn't go, oh, we're letting you be free. You are a free human who is allowed to claim self-ownership and bodily integrity, right? That is absolutely foundational. My body, my choice. But what we saw during COVID mania was actually an inversion of that, where they started to make the argument that if I am afraid, now suddenly your body is my choice, which of course is not how it should work. So our rights, that right to bodily integrity, became conditional, which means it's not a right, because then your rights become whatever the ruling class fears today, right? That scenario was, hey, we're fearing some germs. Turns out the germs were man-made, manufactured, dangerous pathogens that they made more virulent and more dangerous because they are insane people. And I'm not being vitriolic. There is something fundamentally wrong when America and other nations are funding dangerous pathogens and creating them because they think, oh, some other bad guy's going to do it. Well, you know what? If you're doing that, you are the bad guy. So we cannot have situational rights that are enforced by power, because then you don't have rights. And guys, if you don't have the right to bodily integrity, if you don't have the right to bodily autonomy, you are a slave of the state. It's as simple as that. And I think many people who are waking up now kind of realize that through the mandates and through the way we were treated during lockdown and the harm that was caused, right? The cost of compliance here that we're talking about was economic and financial. 3.3 million small businesses were put out of business. That's 22% of small businesses. Almost a quarter of small businesses were harmed by the lockdowns. The whole reaction caused food insecurity. There was all this deferred health and medical stuff, which was a deep cost, right? Delayed care, missed screenings. Of course, they're using that sort of as an excuse for the uptick, it seems, in cancer. There was severe mental health issues. Anxiety and depression went up by almost 25%. Suicidal ideation amongst teenagers and young people went up 10%. And substance misuse actually went up significantly as well, about 13%. And I will say, I heard personally, I quit drinking back in 2017. And I heard from some people who had been inspired by my story, who fell off the wagon themselves during COVID because of the stress and because of this mental health fear paradigm that they created. Education and developmental development for young ones has been really affected. They're talking about learning loss that will never be recovered for some children. And of course, everyone got addicted to their screens during this time as well. And then last but not least, some of the last cost of the compliance was this liberty destruction, this sort of social compliance, this sort of like weird shift that they did again from your right to bodily autonomy, my body, my choice, to, oh crap, we're scared and we got to make a cover story. So now your body, my choice, right? Which was what Fauci said. So the dominant narrative during COVID was, hey, it's this wet market situation. We're just going to cover up the fact that natural immunity actually works. They made these crazy vaccine transmission claims. They basically took the truth and they just pushed it down. They censored all the dissenters. They censored people like me who were talking about informed consent, about previous fines paid by big pharmaceutical companies for intentional fraud and harm, including the largest at the time in 2009 criminal fine paid by Pfizer for intentional fraud, where they said one thing about their product and then it didn't do it. It was billions of dollars. If you shared that press release from the DOJ itself, it was censored. So talking about informed consent, talking about the Nuremberg Code, talking about ethics, all of these things were censored because they were covering up the following. So the censorship industrial complex, and we might even call it now a biomedical security complex, sort of run by Fauci, who, by the way, is the most well-paid federal agent ever. He makes more than the president. His wife was his ethicist, and he basically spent 2 years on TV playing the concerned grandpa who was telling you all the stuff about you should trust the science, while he knowingly was hiding the truth from you. Now, what was the truth? The truth was that they started gain of function. Now, again, gain of function research means they take a virus, in this case, a bat coronavirus, and they make it more virulent, man-made, more virulent, and more transmissible. They call this dual-use research. Hold on, I want to get this. Dual-use research of concern. So this is the language they use as part of their cover story. And one of the things you guys should track and look for on as you explore this, and you should absolutely go do your own research. Don't listen to the government. Anyone who tells you don't do your own research, that's a red flag. That should make you skeptical. You should immediately go do your own research. So there's this term they're using to sort of hide the gain of function stuff. So they play linguistic whack-a-mole. You can watch Rand Paul and Fauci, and everyone's like moving the definition around, and they're doing that to hide the truth. But one of these words that they like to use, which makes it sound so balanced, is dual-use research of concern. DURC is the acronym. And that sounds, oh, okay, dual, that's balanced. So, it has some peaceful applications, but I guess it could have some military applications, right? So it could be public health, or, oh no, the Russians or the Chinese, the other bad guys are going to be doing something. Then they talk about the research of concern, where they where it's like they're glossing over the fact that what they're talking about is high risk pathogen engineering. So gain of function, or this dual use research of concern, when you hear those terms, when you hear phrases like that, when you even hear stories about the lab leak, here's what you should be thinking. They created biothreat amplification experiments that had catastrophic escape potential, and it escaped. That is what the lab leak is. And that Fauci knew from the start, and he covered it up. And how do we know? Because we saw the FOIA requests. We saw in January and February 2020, this Christian Anderson emailed Fauci noting unusual features suggesting a possible engineering or lab manipulation. Fauci flagged this as urgent. He emailed his aide. And then from there, they had phone calls. They actually started to move everything to private encrypted groups. There are emails that say things like, hey, let's not talk about this. Let's not put it in writing. Oh, what if this comes out? So, excuse me, Fauci was saying one thing to you, lying straight to your face on television, forcing you to do things that went against your will, while he 100% knew better. So is something going to happen to him? Here's the depressing part of today's episode, folks. Probably not. And why not? Because we have created a system that protects with impunity the inner circle. He is the high priest of this entire story, and he will probably not be held responsible or accountable. But I am here to tell you that it behooves all of us to bandy together and to demand that this man die in prison. He took away the institutional guardrails. We do need some kind of symbol to say this is not acceptable. No to the censorship industrial complex. But there are legal barriers to getting after him. First of all, of course, there's Biden's preemptive pardon. It is an overbroad pardon. It covers 10 years. It, is retroactive, forward-looking. No one knows if Biden even knows if he signed it, but there is this pardon. So that is something that is a barrier that we would have to overcome. The statute of limitations to lying to Congress, because Fauci did go to Congress, he was in congressional hearings, and he straight up lied, perjury. But strangely, that statute of limitations ran out at the end of May. And now all these revelations are coming out. Isn't that suspicious? Almost like they're all covering for each other. There is no current indictment against Fauci. I hope they do it anyway. I think it's worth it. I hope people bring civil suits. I think we should just bury the guy in legal ramifications for this. They did indict one of his little henchmen, David Morans. I talked about that on a couple of other shows, but this is a low-level guy. It's usually the full guy. They're like, oh, we'll blame one person. Don't look too carefully. Don't expect the head people to go down. That is because we have a two-tier justice system, and it is a bug, not a feature. We have an administrative state and captured institutions, which gives us an unaccountable, permanent government. That is where we are. Nothing is going to happen is the loudest signal you should all hear. Fauci will retire. He will retire wealthy. He's getting royalties. He wrote a book, all of it. And this tells every ambitious bureaucrat, scientist, and operator that you can amplify a biothreat, you can steer the story, you can censor dissent, you can externalize the costs, and you'll be fine. The pattern doesn't just incentivize the outcomes that we saw. That whole system, the whole of statism, the whole of big government, when I yell about big government, guarantees the outcome we saw. And it is up to us to say, hey, we're not going to let this happen again. So the bottom line is, if Fauci isn't symbolically put in prison, then I think we all have to accept that there is no more rule of law in this country, and that we should all just be doing whatever we want. So with the last moments, I am going to tell you what I am doing this week, which is spending my time at the Quill, which is the oldest libertarian clubhouse in the world. It's right here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And we are doing Pork Fest spontaneous order all across the state. And it's everything from tie-dye to Soapbox Idol tomorrow night. Tonight at the Quill at 7 p.m. you can do the activist story hour, where many activists are going to be telling their stories about things they've worked on over the years and ways that they've contributed to expanding liberties here in New Hampshire. And I should say, just in case everyone got super depressed because I am so frustrated with the reality of the system we find ourselves in, there is hope. And that hope lies in New Hampshire. It actually lies in decentralization. It lies in concentrating like-minded people together so that you can create the values in your community that suit the people here. You know, if you want to be scared, go live in a compound where everyone's scared and you guys can lock yourselves down to your, to your own content. But how about you leave the rest of us who don't want to live in a fear paradigm the hell alone? So there was this article in indepthnh.org by Zach Laird that came out on Monday, so you can find that online. It says Free State Project's Pork Fest will be scattered across New Hampshire this year. It is scattered across the state, but it is going to be a lot of fun. It gives you visitors the opportunity to see our great state, to see what the Free State Project's about, to meet different communities. So I hope to see many of you at the Quill during this week. I'm in and out there all the time. So if you do come to Manchester, 131 Amory Street, come say hi. Otherwise, go to porkfest.com, porcfest.com, for the full programming of all the great things happening all over the Free State. I think I'm out of time. That went really fast. I got more to say, but maybe we'll save it for not next week because the studio's closed for the 250th birthday of America. And so I will see you in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, you can find all my content at carlagericke.com. That is CarlaGericke.com. And I wish you all peace, love, and understanding. All right. Fix my hair. Thank you all for joining me here as well. I will see everyone again in 2 weeks. Bye. Oh, come to the Quill. Someone come ahead.